Hello everyone, this piece is titled The Gatehouse. It is an oil painting on hand-primed canvas. I thought I would add some audio to this video. I recorded this over a series of weeks, just using Hyperlapse on my phone. So the piece is from reference, is the first time I painted from reference, and the first time I painted a subject matter of a house. I'll just put this out on the table right off the bat. I am not very good at painting. This is just sort of something I've been doing a lot of as of late. I wanted to record this because it's a gift for family friends of ours, and I thought it'd be fun to look back on and see the process, see if I've made any progress as well as that down the track. Where do I begin with this one? Previous to painting this, I'd been painting a lot of abstract oil-based stuff. I started painting 2 years ago in acrylic, and the subject matter back then was just black and white, something I called shadow forms. They are very abstract. I moved into oil painting as I began to get more interested in the fantasy subject matter. So I've done a fair amount of rudimentary oil paintings, getting progressively more into that sci-fi fantasy genre. But I do a range of stuff. I still do the black and white acrylic paintings, and just next to me actually, while I'm recording this, I have all my work hanging, just loose on canvas. So what I do is I buy the canvas from my local fabric store. It is a heavyweight cotton. I only use heavyweight cotton at the moment, although I know that will change over the course of time. And I prime it once or twice or thrice with gesso. And I sand between layers, and I let it dry for like a day or two. I use sort of a hard board or whatever I have handy to attach the canvas to, sort of a faux stretch. So you just fold the canvas over the board initially. I tape the back with masking tape, make sure it's really taut, same way you would stretch a canvas on a frame. Then I iron the top so that it's as flat as I can get it, and then apply the first layer of gesso. I've been doing this, as you can see in the video here, this is the same method. The board is wider than the painting, but I've given it some extra lip if the recipient wants to frame this piece at some point, or just throw it in the bin. I can do either. You'll see I'm painting on a table. I don't have an easel, and I haven't really had much experience painting at an angle yet. I do a lot of stuff just on flat surface. I actually painted a large piece on the floor, but that absolutely killed my back. I, as a side note, have an immune disorder, and my back is a real constant cause of discomfort. But anyway, painting the branches at this point, and they are an absolute nightmare to paint mentally. If you've ever painted from reference with this sort of degree of detail in oil, it can be kind of tricky. I do not like brushes that they try and sell you at art stores for oil painting, like the really loose bristled ones. I think it's absolutely stupid for anyone wanting to achieve any great detail in oil. So I use paintbrushes that, well, in saying that, I have recently found brushes that are really good, and I believe they're oil paintbrushes, but the bristles are much tighter, and I really prefer those. The ones I'm using in this painting are acrylic brushes, so you can still get a good amount of detail using these. You also see to the left of the screen, or that will change the angle, but I use a sponge to clean the brush. I think it's a little bit better than using paper or the clean spot of your easel. No, not easel, but your paint palette. And I also have a cloth I use, but the sponge is really good. At this point in the painting, I move on to the roof and the actual building itself, which is really exciting because I spent like 2 weeks on that sky just doing as many branches as I could, but I sort of lost my mind a little bit along the way, and got to a point where I figured I'd just move on from that. Doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. It is kind of the fallacy with painting. You know, you want it to look as good as it can, but you get to a point, or at least I do, where I kind of just think, that's as good as this one will get. I can progress better later on on the next one, you know. So I just start chucking down paint for the building. Layer wise, I'm probably not doing this right, and it is definitely inexperience. I haven't painted much this sort of thing before. I'm absolutely positive I'm doing stuff wrong, but it's still quite enjoyable. I'm left-handed, and at this point here, this is when what I made sure to do was layer it with this, doing the sky first and then work down, because I didn't want to smudge anything or have the risk of smudging be as minimal as possible. You can see my left hand still does go over those areas of the painted canvas, which is a real bloody annoyance. That's just the way it is, being a lefty. Paints I'm using are cold. The garage I'm painting in is, it's winter here in New Zealand at the time of this. And it's quite chilly in the garage. I'll paint like sort of midday onwards. Chuck a heater on maybe, but the paint seems to sit quite well when it's cold. Gets a little bit tackier in a warmer environment, and sometimes I prefer it to be less tacky. So I'm just checking down the shadows, trying to replicate the painting to a degree of accuracy. The windowsills I left to this point, and I don't get back to them till right at the end. It's kind of funny. Did not enjoy painting the windows. They've got a lattice work on them too, which is really annoying. So I had to go back and apply this really delicate lattice over all the windows. The trees looked okay. Possibly could have done more on the bark and stuff, but from a distance of 1 or 2 meters away, I thought it looked pretty decent. Was happy with the sky tone overall. I knew it needed to be lighter towards the back of the house to give the impression that it's from behind it. For the paints, I'm using just a solvent to thin them. However, post-mortem on this painting, I realised it might have been better to use a blending medium, or glazing medium. Something to make the paints a bit more transparent. And I didn't even know that product existed at this point. That's how amateuristic this is. So I just went ahead, but I mean, I try and plan a little bit ahead. But I don't know, you just want to get to it, you know, you want to start painting. That's the biggest thing. And you'll see as we get further on, we're at the halfway point now. When I get to the lower points of this painting, I just kind of lose, I don't know, the drive. If I'm honest, it gets a lot harder to paint. The foreground is all frozen over, snowed over plant vegetation. It becomes really tricky to paint. And back to what I was saying about layering, I think if I could redo this painting, I would change how I paint the foreground quite a bit. The layers wise, I think I possibly should have started by thinning down a sepia or something and just shaping everything out, layering it all on, and then building up from there, but I didn't do that. So hindsight is, yeah, it's king. Hindsight is king. I don't know what the phrase is, I've forgotten it. Who cares? Branches look alright. There's actually so many branches I didn't paint, simply because I just couldn't get them all on there. They were tiny. And the image I was using as reference, the actual quality of it was actually so bad. I know it looks good here, but in person, when I was looking at that A4 picture, goodness, it was just so pixelated. There were a lot of details I had to just sort of fill in the blank. And that window is an empty window right until the end. That's another part I've sort of skipped. It took, I'm not sure how much time overall, we've got about 16 minutes of hyperlapse footage. I don't know what period of time it takes between photos when you're hyperlapsing. But it took a while. It took many weeks. I'd come back to this piece. Now I have it hanging next to me. It's 60 centimeters tall by 40 centimeters wide. It's fairly big. The board I'm using for this, that I've got the canvas attached to, is the one I use for a lot of my stuff at the moment. It's the only one I have. I don't have a job at the moment, so I just use whatever we've got lying around the house. And I get the canvas. I don't want to spend money on like pre-made canvas, so I make it myself. Seems to work fine. Like I say, this is real amateuristic. I don't sell any of this stuff. It's not really important at this stage. These are all just, I deem them all practice pieces. I mean, that's probably what anyone does. But overall, I used 2 or 3 different brushes for this. Quite small, no real big brushes. And the paints I used are all Winsor & Newton oil. I made the mistake before this painting, and I will advise anyone who watches this and takes an interest in oil painting to spend more money on the paint than you do on the brushes. You do not want your oil paints separating. You want them to be justified, stay together. I had this black paint that I've used, and I don't know where I got it from, but it was one of those dirt cheap oil paints you find out there in the world, and it's, for some reason, I guess dried too fast, or whatever the case may be, but just the black elements of this painting, they all started cracking. And I do put it down to the fact that it was like a much cheaper paint. So I'd have been meaning to go back to that painting and sand the black off and fix it if I can. I mean, that would be tricky. But it's a real shame. But that's just part of learning. This is all self-taught anyway. I don't have any actual training. The actual building used, the photo here is a gatehouse to a residence in England, in East Sussex. So the land they have, sort of the entrance to it is this gatehouse. There's a date on it, I will butcher it, I think it's 1880 something. But it's all stone and it just looks beautiful in winter and year round. And here we go onto the foliage, the absolute nightmare that is the foreground foliage. Because it was all snow, I made the mistake of reversing the layer sort of direction. I should have started with the base and really built that darker tone up first of the shadows and then added the white on top, but I think I sort of worked in reverse, which was a bit stupid. And hopefully I don't do that again in the future. I had to keep coming back to it, and one of the great frustrations I have with painting is when you're doing a piece like this that you know is going to take time, but every time you put your paintbrush down, you walk away and you come back to it, the periods in between leaving and coming back, it's just, there's so much frustration, like, oh, it doesn't look good, I hate how it looks, and I've still got to finish it, like, I give up. But pushing through that is still really important. And it honestly does not have to look good. I mean, it's all subjective anyway. There's a lot of errors with the foreground here though, yikes. Yikes. I got a little bit impatient, maybe that was my problem. If I'd painted it even slower, perhaps I could have added more detail that overall would have improved the foliage. Not everything's finished in one sitting though. I know some painters out there can complete entire pieces in a sitting, which is incredible to me. I wish I could. Not yet though. Not yet. Yeah, the photo, oh my. For this particular part of the photo, it became really difficult. I was like looking at smudges on a piece of paper. I was like, do I even bother replicating this, or do I just make it up, make something up that looks more accurate than it probably would on paper? But ended up doing something in between the two. The original image I would put up on a screen in a better resolution, just zoom in on areas, just to try and get the angles right. And sometimes you paint from reference and it ends up looking less believable than if you were to make it up. So it's all about that illusion of what should be there. Another issue I had is there was a sort of a green tone to a lot of the vegetation towards the house. And I don't think I nailed that as much as I would have liked to. That's another problem I have, very much a me problem, when I mix paints and then I we'll do a painting session for an hour and then I stop and come back to it. It ends up being like, oh my god, all my paints are dry, I have to remake those paints and I don't get the colour exactly the same. So yeah, it's all a learning process. And here we go, this is it finished. And I'm very happy to say it's done. And thank you all for watching. Until the next one, if I do another one, thank you.